please come forward. If you're a witness, please come forward. If you have evidence, please come forward. I think that was instrumental in what we're seeing now. Ever since, I mean, in 24 hours, we've received 12,000 calls, if you can believe that. Now, I don't know if that's going to
12,000 calls.
Yes, sir.
You said 12,000 calls. You received 12,000 calls?
Now, that doesn't mean 12,000 people who claim to be victimized. It just means 12,000 people have called this line that we published yesterday. And obviously, as you know, there's going to be people that crank calls and people that with foolishness and people with malcontent. But we are sifting through that and trying to make sure that we identify and vet people that have real claims, legitimate, credible claims. Right now, we're talking about 120 people from 25 different states for conduct that occurred over 25 years.
25 different states? Is that what you said? Not cities. You said 25 different states.
Yeah. Because, a lot of these parties obviously took place in Los Angeles, New York, Manhattan, or the Hamptons, and Miami. And a lot of these people were flown in. And this wasn't a secret. I mean, it was known that people were being flown in for these parties. People were being paid cash to attend these parties. People were being identified at clubs or at concerts or on the street even, and invited to these parties. So you have that group of people that are involved. And then you have another group, and maybe this is the more sinister situation where, young people with stars in their eyes wanting to break into the entertainment industry with promises of stardom, who are taken advantage of, in some cases allegedly drugged and abused, and basically just left behind, with shame and guilt. What I'm looking at, obviously, you have an individual who has been indicted and arrested and whose bail has been denied. And obviously he's obviously a target of this, but I'm looking more, in addition to that, of course, who else was involved? What venues were involved?
Right.
Who sponsored some of this conduct? Who benefited from this? Who profited from this? Who was there in the room? Who encouraged this, facilitated this, didn't say a word about it, kept it hush hush? I mean, you can only imagine the number of entities and individuals that could potentially be complicit in all this.
Mr. Busby, and I'm getting there. I was going right there because you talk about the complicitness of those others that may have been involved. I want to know of the survivors, the accusers, whatever word is appropriate. Do they talk about, and have they talked about Diddy Combs, or have they named names and provided names of other, dare I say, co-conspirators in all of this? What can you tell us on that front?
We have a long list of names. And obviously, this is a very sensitive situation. The worst thing we could do is name somebody who was involved or allegedly involved and not have our ducks in a row. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to be involved in ruining someone's reputation by making a mistake. Obviously a lot of this is hard to corroborate. I mean, you're talking about a situation where somebody is, who thinks that all their dreams are about to come true. They're there with somebody who's a mega star and other stars in the room, and they think all kinds of good things are going to happen to them, and probably the worst thing that could happen to them happens. But yes, there are people who owned private homes, people who owned private venues, people that were in the room, people that I'm going to allege knew what was going on and either participated in it, encouraged it, egged it on, if you will, or somehow benefited from it. And that's going to be different for every case. I mean, these are individual cases at different points in time with different people involved, and there'll be different defendants in each case.
Without naming names, because certainly I appreciate you being responsible enough, and dare I say I would have been responsible enough to say I'm not going to even get into names of allegations. I wouldn't put that out there. But may I ask you from a general perspective or a generic perspective, are these alleged co-conspirators, are they public figures? Are they well-known people in Hollywood, in the music industry? Are they people who worked for P. Diddy Combs? Could you be specific in that regard?
I would say yes to all the above. Yeah.
Yes to all of the above.
All the above. People that names that you would know, some people's names you wouldn't know, but are people that are in management or executive positions, people that were benefiting from this culture that was created, people that were there knowing that this was going to happen, people that actually participated, venues that knew it was going on. I mean, just think about it. Just one aspect of this. You know, typically when an entertainer of the stature that P. Diddy was at one point, when he rents out a hotel, he typically would rent out the entire floor, and just a revolving door of people showing up at the front desk whose names weren't being taken down, who were just escorted right up to the floor, and things are happening up there. I mean, it's hard to turn a blind eye. You know, if you have any common sense whatsoever, you know what's going on. People that aren't from, for instance, New York City, that are being flown in from Los Angeles, you know, 5, 10, 15 at a time, who are being paid in cash to attend these various events that are occurring. People that are identified in the crowd of a show and asked to come backstage, and then they're whisked off to some other party, and they find themselves in the morning, you know, not knowing what had happened because they've been drugged, and they're injured, and they're feeling shameful and, you know, blaming themselves. I mean, you can only imagine the various individual scenarios. But the common theme throughout this, at least from what I've gathered, is there's always some sort of drug involved. There's always some sort of drink that I believe will be able to show was spiked in some way with some kind of drug that caused these individuals not to really be able to fight back, perhaps as much as they might have. And then they wake up not knowing what had happened to them, other than they know that they're injured in their private areas. And so many of them went to seek medical treatment. Some of them were drug tested when they did so. I mean, there's several of these individuals who their drug test came back with some weird, I mean, I hadn't even heard of this. You know, I own a farm, and I guess maybe my ranch manager knows what this is, but a horse tranquilizer, you know, it's called Trank. I'd never heard of this.
A horse tranquilizer?
A horse tranquilizer. I mean, it's just ridiculous. You just outrageous when you think about it. But, you know, how did this get into these people's bloodstream? How was, you know, it's just, I think we're just now scratching the surface of this. You know, obviously all of this, these are allegations, you know, even the indictment, those are allegations that the government must prove. But you have a lot of people coming forward saying the same thing. All of it is very similar. And, you know, you have, one of the things I've said, and I think it's true, you have a lot of people right now out there who are watching this happen, who are probably scrubbing their social media, who are probably searching their memories, who are probably deleting texts and data from their phones, and are probably very nervous right now. And I would think they should be.
I'm not going to get in too much to the 9-year-old because that's a child. There's no explanation for that. Zero. Okay. But when you talk about some of these survivors, you hear about half of them are men, half are women. 25 were minors at the time of the alleged incidents. Number one, is that true? And number two, when strictly speaking about the adults, what about those who would say, what are we talking about here? If they were flown in, they were quote unquote sex workers, they knew what they were getting into, it was complicit, it might be reprehensible in some people's eyes, but as Diddy's lawyer said on television weeks ago, it's one thing to be unethical, it's another thing to be illegal, and it wasn't illegal because they were given the impression that it was adult consent involved. What does Mr. Tony Busby say to that?
I think every case stands on its own merit. I think, you know, I could imagine a scenario where somebody was either through a broker or maybe a staff member who went and collected individuals, promised them payment to come and be, you know, you all heard of atmosphere girls or people to attend parties for the atmosphere, and then those people to be taken advantage of and not being allowed to leave and being coerced to do things that perhaps they didn't expect they would have to do. I don't think that's outside the bounds of imagination, but I will say that with regard to a minor, when that's involved, it doesn't matter whether there's payment and consent or attempted consent. Obviously, under the law, you cannot consent to that kind of conduct when you're a minor. And I'm not suggesting that the 120 people here are people that were flown in. I'm just suggesting that that's what they report. Most of the people that I represent were not those people that were recruited and flown in. Most of them are people who were either trying to break into the business or who were identified, were not, part of some group that would typically be flown in anywhere. They were just people that were invited to parties because they were either on the street, in a club, at a bar, at a hotel lobby. I mean, you name it. Every scenario you can think of is probably fits the bill with these 120 some odd people.
When do you expect to start filing these suits?
I'm hoping to file. I wanted to do it in a week, but to be realistic, I said 30 days. But I expect within 30 days we'll start filing individual cases, and we'll continue to file individual cases, and we'll pursue them aggressively. And obviously, it's a Herculean task when you're dealing with a lot of different individuals. With each of them has a different case, different evidence, different defendants, different venue, different law that applies. So it's a tough task. But, it's an important task because I look forward to it.
Your thoughts or your words to people who would say, well, you had a press conference yesterday and it was very, very dramatic. There's over 120 cases that you're going to aim in the direction of P. Diddy Combs, and you're still searching for additional evidence, et cetera, et cetera. So the argument will be made that you don't really have a lock solid case against this man at this particular moment in time. They would say, why have the press conference at all at this particular juncture as you did yesterday? To that, you say what, sir?
To that, I say, could I file the cases against Sean Combs right now? Absolutely. Yeah. But I want to make sure I capture a wide net and capture everybody involved. And that's what I'm trying to do. And part of the purpose of the press conference was to encourage people that witnessed some of these events to come forward. And that's happening now, because I want to make sure when we file the case that we don't just, I want to say it like this, Sean Combs, obviously has a lot of trouble on his plate right now, and, he ain't going anywhere. I want to make sure that anyone that facilitated this, egged it on, participated, benefited from, profited from, they're involved too, because that's really what needs to happen here. It happens in other cases like that. You want to make sure that you include everyone, especially those that enabled and were complicit.
So Tony Busby, to close this interview, you're saying, and I want to make sure I'm quoting you accurately, Sean Diddy Combs is not the only person you're after. You're after anyone who was involved, anyone who was complicit, public figure, private figure, business folks, industries, etc. You don't give a damn who it is. You want them all. That's what you're here to do. Is that correct?
I think you summed it up perfectly. Yes, that's true.
Tony Busby with the Busby Law Firm based out of Houston, Texas, right here on the Stephen A. Smith Show over the digital airways of YouTube and, of course, iHeartRadio. Tony Busby, thank you so much for your time and your expertise. Really, really appreciate it, and thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.